Hi, sunshines and soulmates. It's me, Suze, coming to you with my confessions of a twin flame soulmate. Am I talking about a one in a million fit or a reunion with the divine? A cosmic orgasm or explosion, wise ones have described it as? Or is it simply the other half of your whole? A balance of feminine and masculine energy in one temple, then a coupling with another of the same vibration. Everybody wants to know what soulmates are. So, the only way I can define it is by experience. And this is Joe and my story. We met in 1990. I was already married and I had a child, and Joe was with his significant other. His large group of friends were my clients. We became friends and party buddies. So, we'll bring the first book out and a few pictures. We're going to refer to some astrology here to confirm spirit through Linda Goodman's Love Signs. And here's what Linda had to say about our relationship, is that we would be drawn together by large groups of people. It was doubtful we would ever come together on our own, like, say, choosing, to just hang out with that person. And as you spend time with this other person, of course, you're trying to figure out why they do what they do. And either it becomes a lifelong observation of that other person, or it's kind of like, whatever, I don't even really know why they do what they do kind of thing, and they move on their way. So, Joe and I went down the path, of course, of observing one another and becoming better and better friends over 25 years. This is a picture of me on my wedding day. And like I said, I was married a few years before I met Joe, and I already had a child. Interestingly enough, I was flown by the bride's family to do the wedding hair in Las Vegas. So believe it or not, my ex and myself were there on Joe's wedding day. And we were in Death Valley here. We had taken a drive in the desert, and it was beautiful. And it was a weird situation. But like I said, we were all friends. Here's Smokey Joe on his wedding day. Y'all know him with long hair. He was quite GQ then, wasn't he? Of course, because I did the hair, right? Okay, so let's just leave that now and pick back up. Our relationship deepened, especially around the time of the 9/11 tragedy. A mutual friend of ours decided to check out the day before the big operation, and he hung himself buck-ass naked in the garage. So you can imagine that, our talks became more philosophical. They got deeper. We talked about spirituality, talked about our beliefs as far as the continuation of our spirits and souls through time and space, stuff like that. And of course, we raised our children together. I mean, Joe was there from the very day that two of my children were born. My oldest was about 6 by the time that, we were hanging out like this. And of course, his daughter, I've known ever since she was a baby. And her and the kids are all brothers and sisters. So even before I knew how I felt about Joe, we had already blended our families out enough too, so we were involved socially and privately. Um, by 2005, I had adopted some new philosophies into my life, and you know, the big one I think first was the Bach flower essence, and this how I kicked the Valium. And of course, stress was always at the forefront of my experience, because in the search to be who I really was, of course, there was always someone telling me that I couldn't be that person, so I'd just take a Valium and chill out and not listen to him, I guess is how I dealt with it until that time. I also quit drinking alcohol and eating meat within the same year, so there were a few people that thought, you know, I had went crazy because all they knew is that I liked vodka and cheeseburgers, I guess, at the time. Now, of course, my vibration was raised, and you see, that's the whole purpose behind what they call eliminating the false ego or burning out the dross as we go along on this spiritual journey that we're on together. I had also done every major organ cleanse imaginable, and even a heavy metal cleanse and an EMF cleanse and things like that. So theoretically, my temple was preparing for a bridegroom, or just preparing to be at a place where I was good with myself. I mean, really deep down good with myself. So by the time Rudolf Steiner entered my life, I mean, it reignited the passion that I always had for the esoteric, the metaphysical, and the spiritual realms. And I had to run away from that, you know, when I met my ex back in 1986. And he wasn't really too fond of that aspect of my duality. So I was young. I put that down for a while, and I think that that was perfectly timed. You know, this is where the saying know thyself comes in, because really what loving myself meant to me at that time was different than how I had perceived it when I was younger, of course. And along the journey, it was surely difficult for different reasons, but I would say this was the point where I decided that I was going to put myself first, which to some people is selfish, and this story will get more selfish by the minute if we look at it that way. I prefer not to, of course, because this is what brought me to you guys. You know, it became a lot easier for me, the struggle did, and I was free to pursue the mysteries, you know, not to be scorned or belittled is where I was at when I brought these books home. And I knew that bringing the books home, I would pay a price because it wouldn't find favor. But that was a very big part of how I realized Joe is the man that I know him to be now. You see, he was the first one in all the years of never really talking to anybody that accepted me completely for who I was and thought I was one of the best people on the planet, no matter how far out the concepts were that I was communicating. And through reading those books, man, I realized I loved him unconditionally. And I thought, you know, what am I going to do with this? So as I was reading my Steiner, which of course I go over in one of my other YouTubes, what you're dealing with in a completely different language, is that as much as we may think that we have secrets, or that, say, like everybody freaking out that, the internet knows what you're doing. Well, surely Creator God knows what you're doing too. And so, as I was reading these works, and of course exploring my own mind, I knew how my mind felt. There was still a lot to work through, of course, obviously. By that time, Joe was divorced, and I was still married, but it really didn't make it any less dangerous that I had realized how I felt, and of course, checking it and making sure that inside myself and that I was ready to do this. It was a pretty serious time in my life. So, through the beginning of our saga, you can see how there's so many confirmations of spirit that Joe's my twin flame, right? Because, to me, the primary proof would be that even if there was that 1% chance that you and your twin flame could be incarnate together on the same planet, in the same vicinity, and actually come together like easy breezy, that's not what a twin flame is. There's usually a lot of difficulty in the story, and even sometimes one of the people is what they classify the runner, and that would be because the difficulty level would just be something that you would say this is absolutely unobtainable. So here is my best guy friend, my party buddy, my confidant, and I could accept his baggage, and he came with as much as I did, surely, and we had synchronistic timelines, although completely different circumstances, and there we go into the studying of the person again. But, it's like two people like us could rise to the highest people that we could be if we were together, of course, and come together for a purpose. And honestly, it's amazing that initially the relationship was never focused on sexuality or sensuality. So, of course, as these feelings stir in the heart, you review the entire time, right? I'd like to integrate something now, and it's an innerstanding about twin flames. The probability that the majority of people would define it as reunion with the divine, welcoming the bridegroom, the ecstasy of, they say, a cosmic orgasm. And, here again, this gets a little tough to talk about, but I do believe that many of us know what that is already, and it's the Kundalini rising. So, if you've ever felt that energy shoot up your spine, it surely does invoke all the chakras, and when it hit me, it knocked me down, and I sat on the couch and went with it. It was incredible. So I definitely know what that is. Humanity has experienced, of course, any kinds of soulmates, which twin flames fall into some kind of a romantic notion. And, you know, surely as children of God, if we're thinking about reuniting with our creative God, our creator God and creative, right? This entity with no body. I mean, how do those things go together in a sexual creature's mind? And hopefully this conversation that anyone is sitting in on here, it can already accept the idea that we're sexual creatures from the word go. It's very natural and not the bad thing, of course, that we were led to believe in the false program. So I'm going to bring that in now. Like I said, you know, it seems almost so sinful, just like the first time that you say you have a spark of the divine in you, or that you actually are. I mean, it's kind of the same thing, I think. By this point, there can be no religious dogma in your spiritual journey, of course, too. So, I knew how I felt, and I had chosen my path. I'd explored my true intentions, and I was ready to confess my unconditional love to Joe. I had no idea if he'd be attracted to me. You know, I'd be on to friend status, and although he was married for all those years, I mean, he was very true to the one he was with, almost an aesthetic type personality. And that wasn't the background, of course, I had as a woman that had to explain to my kids that I've loved all the men that I've been with, even besides their fathers. So we come from different approaches. I also knew that withdrawing my love from the man that I was contracted to would have consequence, and I would say serious ramifications if it wasn't done in the most loving of ways. So this is the way that I first experienced that truth. With Steiner, of course, we go hand in hand with Gautier, who was the genius behind the life of plants, and he had described it like a tree. So let's say that you withdraw love and the basic necessities, water, caring of the soil, whatever, to a tree, that tree will begin its decay and death process. Some trees are stronger than others. It takes hundreds of years to affect the tree. My ex, I knew wasn't that strong of a tree, but I also knew that he'd be better off with me setting him free. So I went through that, and you know, I had to wonder, I mean, could I become whole through this experience? I mean, was that actually what was going on? Could I forgive myself completely of my past and integrate it into the future that I imagined? All the odds should have been against it, and you know, if it proved true, the road would be filled with a vision of heaven on earth for us, finally and forever. Let's think about this for a minute. I love my best friend unconditionally. I'm gonna flip my world. Have to tell hundreds of clients, not to mention my husband, my children, any peer group that was looking in, anything that had to do with my business, or, you know, who I portrayed myself to be. And something that I did have to explain to people they always saw me. Actually, I had this happen on Facebook. Someone said that my stuff gets so much attention, like it's dramatic and colorful or whatever. And even though everyone saw my life pretty good, I mean, what I was saying to people was, yeah, I'm happy 70% of the time, but the 30%, man, is the reason why my blood pressure is over 150. And, you know, that was hard for those people as well, because look at all the difficult hardships and things that they dealt with. So to ask somebody to understand the 70-30 ratio was definitely difficult, I would say. So the night came that I was going to tell Joe, right? And we had been hanging out together earlier that night, and he had already left. I called him back, asked him, you know, if he would come back and talk to me, and so here's what I said to him when he came back. I told him that I loved him unconditionally, and I wanted to love him however he wanted me to love him, and I didn't even know what that meant. And maybe if I had a month of touching him, that, you know, we could figure this out and see where our lives would go. Isn't that something, to be buddies with somebody that long, and the only thing that you ever touched was when you were handing them something? So I'm talking about laying hands on, right? And from the first time I touched him, I knew. That's probably why I never touched him all those other years, except for doing his hair or hanging out. So now I have to confess to my husband, right? Or, you know, would I be on the down low? Sometimes Pisces are known for the double secret life, and of course I wasn't going to have anything to do with that kind of an idea, because it would have been a blasphemy to the love that I had committed myself to about Joe before I had ever told Joe. So, you know, what was I now? Was I a polygamous? And of course we know that it's only in the best fairy tales that people are monogamous, but I knew I wasn't a polygamist either. So I guess I maybe just looked like a big whore to some of the people at the time. But in my defense, I will say that when I was yoked to the man that I married, I had gotten pregnant, and he said, you know, you need to get rid of that baby. And I said, you know what, screw you. I'm not doing it. And we did care about each other. We did love each other, and we made the best of it, just like many people do. So when you're asking, how will you find that twin flame or that, you know, person? Well, what if you already got yourself into something else? And that's usually why most people don't find their true happiness, right? So, talk a little bit about soulmates here again. So we have our twin flames, right? And the twin flames' purpose, of course, is to do the great work and harness and vibrate love. So a lot of answers in this book for the seekers on the path, right? But the way I see it, our love channels down, radiates through us, and goes out and affects the people around us. They can feel that vibration. This is a piece of art I made about it. And I know it's hard to see because it's yellow, but you see it's Joe and I entwined into one body. Another place that we'll find clues to this is in alchemy books. So it's kind of wild. The first time I saw this in an alchemy book and related it to Joe and I, and you can see that we were pretty involved in this book. We tagged it all and left the little markers so we could get around. But they actually show how the king and queen come together, lay down together, go through a process of the elements breaking down. Sometimes they call that the putrefaction. Sounds scary, doesn't it? The incredible magic, I guess how we see it, occurs where the two become one. We see the king and queen. And even though they were one, they come out again as two. But you understand there's incredible depth in these symbols. So, knowing that from the go, you can imagine how potent that idea of a twin flame was, and that it actually spoke within me. I surely might have not. Well, yeah, I did. I took it very seriously. I mean, for those of you who know me, I am fairly serious anyhow. Alright, karmic soulmates. So, you know, karmic soulmates are generally very, very, very close relationships. Yes, a lot of them are sexual. As many of them can be the main players in your life, like let's say your children. So before your children choose to incarnate, they decide what they want to give back to God, theoretically, and they choose specific details. And then that's where we come in and we help with that experience. I just spoke about that recently in The Little Soul and the Sun. But so many times, I mean really, if you had the choice to have to learn the hardest lesson in your life, you would choose someone that you went round and round with. I would say, instead of say someone that was a stranger and that you had no connection to, surely. So, the other thing about karmic soulmates, they're always the profound friendships, like even the ones that our spiritual family has on Facebook, that transcend normal boundaries. And so I think now that everyone has got the little memo that Ascension is underway and they're going to reunite, there's so many different probabilities. And at this point, all I can say is this: be careful what you ask for, because you will get it. And it may not be what you expect, but that is just so much part of the fun, right? I do think Joe and I could be classified as karmic soulmates. We did have definitely lessons to come together, and I think the biggest thing that we did for each other is allow each other the freedom to be who we are and to love one another on a multiple dimensional probability kind of a scenario. I mean, I'm sure that we've had other lifetimes where we played less significant roles to one another, but I'll bet you sure as anything they were profound. A couple things that were pretty cool about this to confirm spirit. So believe it or not, when Joe and I came together, and of course no one knew, there had to be a few moments of secret, right? You know, Joe was obviously very happy, and so was I, but the one night his mom said, you know, hey Joe, I'd like to talk to you. And he says, you know, not right now, Mom. Everything's okay. There's nothing wrong with me. I'm just really tired and going to bed now. At this time, you know, he was at his mom's. And she called him back upstairs. And here's what she said to him. She said that Joe and I were talking to her while she was, doing that thing we call sleep, when she was in the astral realm. And that she was counseling us on the moral ramifications of our actions. And like I said, confirmation of spirit. I knew that from the word go, and so did Joe. But it was beautiful that his mama received that message. And so, needless to say, I love Grandma Mary. This is a tough one to talk about. We will be discussing this a lot, but another indicator was my oldest daughter's channeling of who our archetypes are in her belief system. And of course, oddly enough, she got a lot of it right, but a lot of times, like we're seeing with different friends and situations that we're in, that sometimes people build too much of their own pain into it and might not get the message clear or non-judgmentally. So that was a big one. And also too, everybody refers to Joe and I as married. They'll say, well, how's your husband? And I say, seriously, we aren't legally married. But even before I told Joe how I felt about him, I felt more married to him than I ever felt to my ex. And, like I said, last but not least, I always knew Joe loved my children long before him and I became a couple. So, we've been together the way that we are now since 2007. And the phenomena has been ongoing ever since. It's been awesome co-creating and sharing knowledge and growing together and arising in love. There's some that will never see this as a sacred story or even approve or understand, and surely some may say we're pretty dangerous too, because surely this can't really all be. But when we've faced the pain and obstacles together, it's like it's just a reflection. Or a wave that's been subsided and calmed. We were initiated for sure, and experienced many signs and wonders over this time, and had a lot of emotional and physical healings together. And now we unite with those who vibrate like us and are committed to issuing in an age that's never been seen before. And although we are one, him and I, we're just like everybody else. And I already know that when we are called to walk through the portal, that I have to walk in alone, and so does he. We don't get to hold hands. We're not special, but it's surely been a blessing to be with this man. So I feel like it's very special. But we're really all going through the same thing. Have faith, guys, and you're going to find out the questions to your greatest mysteries. And when we love our neighbor as ourselves, oh, right, we're going to love ourselves, that's right. We're going to be discerning. We're going to realize that we are one with all of this creation here on planet and off as well. Commit to knowing yourself so well that you never doubt your experience again. Prepare your temple and open your heart. It's your homecoming. That's what I wrote. So, I wanted to show you something before I close this one out. You know, this is the picture that the nuns took of Christ's face in the sun during the miracles of Medjugorje. And one of the books that really helped me on my journey, and I suggest it, would be Love Without Conditions. There we go, by Paul Ferrini. And you gotta say here again, isn't that beautiful? Look at the phenomena that we're seeing every day. One more book real quick. And doesn't it figure? The two of my favorite guys, Bruce Lipton and Greg Braden, are on the front cover of this book. And you know, when I went and picked it up from the library, I was like, look, these guys are everywhere. But it's called Measuring the Immeasurable, and it is the scientific case for spirituality. So, peace, love, and light from the third cosmic ray. And I will do more YouTubes on our personal story. There's much more to tell. Thank you. Oh, and subscribe. Suze Pratt on YouTube. Bye.